Hi friends, I'm Abby and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a should you read the Ending Fire trilogy. The first book being the Final Strife, the second one being the Battle Drum, and the third one being the Ending Fire, all by Saara El-Arifi. So this is a recently finished trilogy. The final book, The Ending Fire, came out in September 2024, so it has just wrapped up, so it could be the perfect time to dive into this newly completed fantasy trilogy. So before I get into it, should you read, I will do a brief synopsis of the first book to sort of give you a flavour of what this series is all about. So The Final Strife is a multi-perspective fantasy series. We're set in a world where your place in society is defined by your blood colour. So the red bloods rule. They have all of the power, they look down upon all of the other blood types. Then you have the blue bloods, who have some sort of position in society, but they do more menial tasks. They are looked down upon, but they aren't as looked down upon as the ghost bloods, so the clear blooded. The ghost bloods try to rise up hundreds of years ago and rebel against this whole system, and for that they have had their hands cut off and their tongues cut out to stop any further rebellion happening from that population ever again. As well, the red bloods are able to practice magic and the other blood types are not. 10 to 15 years prior to the start of the book, some babies have been swapped at birth. So some red-blooded babies have been swapped with some blue-blooded babies so that these red bloods can be raised as blue bloods and experience the hardships of the real world society. And they're raised in these harsh conditions to fight, and then when they reach their maturity, to enter into this thing called the Akbar, which is the set of trials that are used to find the next wardens, the next leaders of the society. So that's when we enter in at the beginning of the book, when this set of trials is starting up again, and we're seeing these red-blooded babies that have been raised as blue bloods entering into this. One of the main focuses and areas that I particularly loved in this series is the world building. The world building is done so well and it's so intricately put together that in each of the books it expands and grows and has such a focus, and it's so interesting and so different from some of the other worlds that I have experienced in the past. So this first book is very much setting that scene on this world, and so you sort of get an idea of where you are, what's happening, and the bit of the world that we are seeing. And then in the second one it expands and you get so much of these revelations of, oh okay, the world is a lot bigger than what we believed in this first book. And then the third book is less of an expansion and just more of a and now let's climax this and conclude this, would be sort of my way of seeing it. Scene setting, second book's expanding, third one climaxing. But I found the world building and the way that it was done is a massive strength to Saara El-Arifi's writing, that it was one of my favourite aspects of this, and seeing how that all connected and the different twists and turns within the structuring of the world and the politicking of it, I think was done really well. There are some darker themes throughout this. I think you can probably tell when I said, and they have their hands cut off and their tongues cut out, just very casually. It is not the lightest of reads. I think in terms of the way that it's written, I never found it overpoweringly grim. Obviously these characters are going through some very, very grim things. A lot of them are going through oppression, that they have been raised as ghost bloods or blue bloods, and they have been oppressed, and the challenges and the sacrifices they have had to make and the trauma that they've been put through because of the way that society is structured. There's a lot of racism through this based on your blood type, that people are very much judged on their blood type. And for the ghost bloods, it's very obvious what your blood type is because of the physical harm that's been done to them as babies. So it is quite a brutal world. And the death penalty in here is very brutal as well. There's a lot of death through these books. And then the other one is drug addiction as well. So one of our main characters, Saara, has been a drug addict, and at different points in the series you see her at different points in her journey with this addiction, and it runs through the series and her struggles with this addiction. I'd say particularly in the first book, but it is definitely there throughout the series, that it is a big part of her personality, whether that she's in the grips of that addiction or in the healing of not being addicted but still sort of being an addict, and that she will always be an addict and that she can't fall off the bandwagon. So there are probably some like triggers in there for certain readers. I don't have a full list of like trigger warnings for the series, but there's just a few that really stood out to me. And then, as I've sort of alluded to, it is a multi-perspective fantasy series. We do have a cast of characters, Saara being one, who is that red-blooded baby that's been raised as a blue blood. We also follow a blue-blooded baby who's been raised as a red blood, Anor, and then there's like a ghost blood, Hassa, that we follow predominantly. So there is this sort of cast that we are following throughout, and I'd say all of them are quite flawed. Like, they're definitely not perfect human beings, and Saara's example that I just said with her drug addiction, that it can be quite frustrating to read from, because you're just like, come on, pull yourself together, pull yourself together. So they are definitely not perfect human beings. They aren't like the best people to follow, but they are all very compelling to follow. I'd say that their flaws make them feel very, very human and real. And I go, okay, you're not a perfect cookie cutter person. You have all these facets of your personality which show that you're not just all good. You are not just all good. You're quite grey and grey morality, and you're making bad decisions. But I can sort of understand why you're making those decisions, but they annoy me because of the logic that you've used to get there. So I would say, if you particularly like an intricate world and that like world building focus, then I would recommend the series, because I definitely love like world building. I love world building. If you don't mind unlikable characters, then I think you could like the series, and that you like multi-perspectives, characters being sort of like separated and across different places. I'd say it's quite a steady pace in terms of like the way that it, like the pacing of the series, that it is quite steady, although I think it does get faster, particularly in that third book, which leads me into my flaws, that I do think the third book was a little bit rushed in places. That the first and second book had so much like world building and setup and character development, and then we move into the third book and there's a lot of things that need to be done in terms of the plot, that it becomes the third book is a lot more plot centric as we are moving things along, which is understandable, that you have to get all of your pawns into position for the climax of the book. But that meant the third book felt quite plot heavy and fast paced and like a little bit rushed to me, potentially because the first and second book, although there is definitely a strong plot there, they felt like a bit more of a steady pace with that like world building and character development. But that could also be like a personal preference, in that I do typically prefer first books in series to finales, that it takes a lot for I don't know, finales I find are hard to hit. I would also say that despite like, I mean, I love the way that she has done her world building, I do not think she is the best romance writer. So there is like a romantic subplot, or multiple romantic subplots running through the series, but I do not think that the romances are Saara El-Arifi's strong point. That they're fine, and they work okay as subplots, and you know, I was rooting for the characters, like I was rooting for it, but I don't think it's her strength. I think her strength is in like the politics and the world building and the crafting of it, and like the world, yeah, the crafting of the characters, that I don't think that like the tension of a romance is particularly her strength. If I was to like rate the series, I think the first book might potentially be my favourite. It might be a sort of like slow downhill, but it's not much of a downhill. Like it might be like a 5 to a 4.5 to like a 4.25. So it's like, yes, I do think the first book is my favourite, but I still think the rest of the series is really, really good. So like it definitely lived up to my expectations in terms of like my progression through the series, that they weren't like one-upping each other as the books went on, but they were relatively steady, and that does match with like my expectations of myself, that I typically do love a first book. So I would definitely recommend the series if you have not read it. I've really enjoyed reading this series, like learning about this world, these characters, the breadth of it, the different personalities that are throughout this series. So I would definitely recommend this. If you have not read it, if you've not heard of it, now is the time, because it is all complete, and so you will be reading something where you're not having to wait any longer for the next book in the series. And I will say that I think everything wrapped up in a satisfying way. So although I was just saying that the third book felt a little bit rushed, I am very happy with where it got to in the way that it concluded, and I did find it quite satisfying the way that this all wrapped up. I'm hoping that Saara El-Arifi's other series and future works will continue in the same vein and with this same strength. She currently has the Fae bound series coming out, which I haven't liked. I read the first book, I haven't liked it as much as this series, I think because it is more romance heavy, and as I said, I don't think romance is her strong suit, but I am interested to see where that one goes, definitely. So I would definitely recommend the author, and particularly this series by her, if you're after a sort of gritty adult fantasy that's, although got a lot of dark themes, doesn't read too dark for some reason. It is, but it isn't. I don't know, it just doesn't feel as dark as like something that's actually marketed as grimdark. Or maybe it's just that I've read some grimdark and so my expectations have skewed a little bit. So would 100% recommend. Let me know if you have read this or if you are thinking of now picking this up. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my future videos. Bye.